The snow had started again just as the wagon rolled over the last ridge into Deadwood Hollow. A town more grit than grace, its buildings hunched like old men against the wind. Elkhorn signs creaked on rusted hinges, smoke rose in crooked lines from the chimneys, smelling of pine and ash. The driver didn't wait long. He dropped her things: a canvas satchel, a bundle wrapped in rabbit skin, and a medicine bag worn smooth with a jand, snapped the reins without looking back. She stood, alone in the white silence. Her name was Wee, though few here would care to learn it. Her dress was stained with travel, the hem damp from melted snow. Braids once tied with red thread had come half undone, dark strands clinging to her face. Her cheek still bore the yellowing bruise of fever, and her breath came slow, as though her ribs hurt to expand. That she walked the length of Main Street with careful dignity. People watched from behind curtains or beside barrels. A woman clutching her child crossed to the other side. A man in a fur coat spat into the snow and muttered, "Savage girl should have died in that river." She heard it. She did not flinch. The letter she carried, crumpled, smudged with her thumbprint, was addressed to Reverend and Mrs. Hodges, who had once promised her mother's sanctuary. She found the house near the chapel, red shutters shut tight. She knocked, once, twice. The door cracked open, then closed again just as quickly. "We hadn't known she was like you," the woman's voice said through the wood. "We cannot help. You should go back where you came from." Wea stared at the door, her frostbitten fingers curling. There was nowhere to go back to. Her tribe had left with the season. Her mother had died 3 winters ago. The white man who pulled her from the river had vanished before she could speak his name. She turned and walked into the falling snow. Her footprints the only sign she'd ever been there at all, but something in her step, slow but not broken. She wasn't finished yet. "When you're ready, say." "Certainly." Here's the town's edge faded into pale hills, snow soft and cruel. Wea found shelter in an old trapper's shack half buried behind a row of collapsed fencing. Barely more than a lean-to with a rusted stove and 3 cracked windows that refused to shut. The wind slid in at night like a whispering ghost, and she tucked her skirts tighter, curling into the corner with a woven shawl pulled over her head. There was no firewood, no food except what she had carried: 2 rounds of cornbread, a dried chokecherry strip, and 1 thin pouch of smoked fish. She rationed it like prayer. Each morning, she rose before the light, stepping through the frost-crusted door to walk. Not aimless. Purpose kept her spine straight but careful, quiet, eyes down. She circled town, learning it like she would. A stream's edge, where the shadows gathered, which buildings barked dogs, where the people stared too long or not at all. She found the water pump behind the livery stable. She found discarded fabric scraps near the dressmaker's bin. She gathered bark, broken crates, anything dry enough to burn. On the 3rd day, a boy no older than 10 threw a stone at her back. It struck her shoulder with a dull thud. "Go back to the trees," he yelled. His father didn't stop him. Didn't turn. She bent down, picked up the stone, and placed it gently on the side of the road as if it were sacred. Then she walked on. At night, the cold bit deeper, but she whispered old songs to herself, ones her mother had sung when the fire smoked too low and the wind howled like wolves. She was not angry, not yet, just tired, a tiredness that went deeper than bones. But still, she moved, still, she breathed, and somewhere beneath the town's judgment, winter's weight, and the ache of old wounds, her spirit stirred. A quiet fire, small but alive, refusing to go out. The snow eased, but the cold held. Frost crusted the window panes like lace. Wea, wrapped in her mother's faded shawl, walked to town with a basket of mended goods folded neatly inside shirts with missing buttons, socks stitched with quiet care, a baby's bonnet whose ribbon she'd rethreaded by lantern light. She didn't ask for charity, she asked for work. Most doors stayed shut. Some opened just a crack enough to drop a shirt out, never enough for a face. How much for the cuffs? 2 cents. Or half a loaf, if there's bread. At the bakery, she offered to sweep for leftover flour dust. At the dressmaker's, she cleaned pins off the floor. The general store let her polish the counter. One morning, though, the owner never met her eye. His wife didn't. Once Anne nodded, tight-lipped, as if seeing something she couldn't admit out loud. Children pointed. Some laughed. "She don't talk much," one girl said. "Maybe she don't know how," another giggled. She knew how. She simply chose silence over the weight of explaining herself in a language not her own. Words were too easily twisted, but her hands, they told the truth. By the 2nd week, people began leaving things near the shack: a jar of preserves, a spool of thread, a cracked pot. Not kindness, not yet. More like uneasy offerings to a spirit they didn't understand. She accepted them with the grace of one who had never expected anything. Each night she stitched by candlelight, eyes tired, shoulders stiff, heart steady. Her fingers bled from cold and thread, but she kept on. In town, they still whispered, "Wise she here? Who does she belong to?" No one, she thought. I belong to no one. But in the quiet rhythm of her needle, the scent of pine sap on her sleeves, and the small pile of folded garments beside her, a new identity was taking shape, one not given by tribe or town, man or myth. Wea, Amenda, the one who endured. The bell over the general store door gave a soft jangle as Wea stepped inside. Snow snow melting from her boots onto the plank floor. She kept her eyes low, hands folded over the small jar of salve she had traded 3 evenings of sewing for. Behind the counter stood a man she hadn't seen before, broad-shouldered, sun-browned, with sleeves rolled to the elbows and sawdust clinging to his shirt. He was fixing a jammed drawer with the quiet patience of someone used to making things last. He didn't speak right away, just nodded once, a gesture not of welcome, but acknowledgement. She placed her jar on the counter. "Trade," she said, softly, "for flour if it's enough." He looked at the jar, then at her hands, red-knuckled, cracked at the tips, but steady. "Homemade." She nodded. He took the jar, uncapped it, sniffed once. "Pine and bear fat. Real clean work." He weighed her with his gaze, not unkindly, not hungrily, just as a man who builds things might assess the shape of an unfamiliar tool. Curious, respectful. "I'll give you a half sack," he said, scooping it carefully. "You'll need it with weather coming." She blinked at that. The generosity, or perhaps the simple acknowledgement that she would still be here when the next snow fell, as he handed over the parcel. Their fingers brushed, brief, nothing lingering. But her hand flinched, not from fear, but from the shock of being touched without force or demand. He saw it, said nothing, just turned back to the drawer and kept working. She left without a thank you. Words didn't come easily, but she paused at the door, turned slightly. "Your drawer," she said. "The back rail's loose." He looked up, eyebrows lifted. Then he smiled. "Small, real." She stepped back into the snow, the flower tucked beneath her shawl. The wind was still bitter, but something in her chest had shifted, just enough to notice someone had seen her, not as broken, not as burdened, just as herself. He was there most mornings, sweeping the store's porch, unloading crates from the back, fixing things that didn't belong to him. Folks called him Elias the carpenter, but not with much warmth. He'd come west alone, they said, after some heartbreak in St. Joseph. Brought into the store when the former owner took sick and never left. Didn't ask. She only noticed how he nodded to her before others, how he wrapped parcels with care when handing them to her, how his gaze never lingered too long. They began to meet at the edge of necessity. She brought hand-stitched gloves for barter. He made sure she got full weight in sugar. She mended a rip in his coat's shoulder. He left a new tin cup outside her door. Never discussed, never labeled, but both knew one day. She came for needles and found him fixing a shelf behind the counter. He handed her the packet and a folded scrap of muslin without a word. She opened it later. 6 buttons, bone polished smooth. She kept them in her medicine pouch like coins. Another day she found a basket near her shack. Inside, a block of wood carved and sanded into a spoon. Her name, "We are etched in careful strokes on the underside." He had asked no one for the spelling. Sometimes they spoke, sometimes not. "It'll thaw soon," he said once. After she came in with snow in her hair, she looked out the window. Even the hardest frost gives way. He met her eyes then, not surprised, just seeing her, as if that simple reply confirmed something he had suspected about her all along. No one else talked to her like that, not with meaning beneath plain words. With Elias, silence wasn't empty, it was full of noticing. In a town that still looked through her, she'd found one man who didn't look past her. He looked into her, and stayed. The thaw began slow, just a drip from the eaves, a softness to the frozen dirt underfoot. But Weah felt it first, not in the air, but in her chest, something loosening, warming. She watched Elias from her usual place near the dry goods shelves of canned peaches and flour sacks, between them as he helped an elderly man carry a sack of oats. His hands were rough, calloused, built for wood and work, but he lifted things gently, like everything deserved not to break that night. She lit the lantern early and spread her cloth scraps across the floor. Her fingers worked with the same care she once used to stitch healing talismans with her mother, threading memories into seams. By morning, it was done. A small pouch sewn from leather and soft blue fabric, the inside lined with rabbit fur, the stitching strong and neat. On the outside, a pattern in red thread, a mountain, a river, and a sun rising, her people's symbol for endurance, for beginning again. She wrapped it in brown paper and left it on the counter. The next time she came for salt, said nothing, just nodded and walked out. He didn't call after her, but when she returned 2 days later, the pouch was gone and, in its place, sat a paper-wrapped parcel with her name written in bold strokes. Inside, a worn but sturdy book. Field Guide to Medicinal Plants of the West. Her throat caught. The pages smelled of pine and ink, of thoughtfulness. He'd seen her, truly seen her, not only the hunger in her belly or the quiet pride in her work, but the mind behind it, the memory, the craft. That night, she held the pouch he carried now. She'd seen it tied to his belt and whispered the old words over a flickering flame. Words not of love, but of recognition, of offering. In Lakota, there was no word for romance as the townspeople used it, but there were words for bowing, for walking beside. And in that silence, shared through cloth and paper and warmth, she knew he was walking beside her now. The spring market came with the scent of river mud and fresh bread, tents flapping in the breeze like pale wings. Baskets of radishes and rhubarb lined the main road, and children chased chickens between Wagon wheels. We had debated staying home. The town had thawed with the weather, but its eyes still held winter. Yet the book Elias had given her now sat worn with use, pages marked in careful script. One note in the margin read, "This one grows near the mill creek." He wanted her to keep walking in the open. So she did. She carried a tray of her herbal salves and mended cloths, settled beneath the edge of the chapel's stone wall. Most passed her by. A few women looked, whispered. One man sneered under his breath. Then she heard his boots. Elias stood beside her table, not behind it, not off to the side, but beside her, arms folded, gaze steady. He said nothing, just picked up one of her jars, opened it, nodded thoughtfully, and handed her a nickel without asking the price. The gesture cracked the air like thunder. People stared, a few turned away. Mrs. Hodges dropped her onion bundle. Someone muttered, "Shameful." But Elias didn't flinch. He placed her pouch, her gift back on his belt where all could see it. Then he looked at Weir, and the corners of his mouth lifted. Not a grin, just a quiet smile meant only for her. She stood taller after that. Sold 3 jars, 2 bundles of stitched cloth. When she passed the bakery, the owner's daughter gave her a crooked little curtsy. Elias walked beside her most of the way home. Their hands didn't touch, but the space between them felt full of breath, of courage, of something beginning to bloom. He didn't speak until they reached the crossroads. "Let me know if you need more paper for the book," he said. Dan Wya looked up at him, wind tugging gently at her braids. "I think," she said softly, "I have all I need for now." And for the first time, she didn't feel like the girl who'd been left behind. She felt like someone becoming. The fire crackled, low in the pit between them, its orange glow licking the edges of shadow. Around them stretched open prairie, quiet, windswept, stars scattered like salt across black velvet. Weir sat wrapped in her shawl, knees drawn close, her fingers tucked beneath the folds. Elias sat across from her, one hand resting on his knee, the other absently stirring embers with a stick. They had come to the river to find a patch of wild yarrow, as the book described, but neither of them had moved in some time. The stillness between them wasn't uncomfortable, it was full, like the earth waiting for spring to press up through its skin. He spoke first. "First time I saw you, you looked like a woman carved from winter, like nothing could touch you anymore." She looked into the fire. "Everything had already touched me." Elias's jaw tensed, but he didn't look away. "I know what that feels like. To walk around full of bruises no one sees. And I still keep going." The wind tugged her braid gently across her cheek. She didn't brush it away. "My mother used to say we don't carry pain to be pitied. We carry it to shape who we become." He nodded. "Then you must be made of iron and grace." She blinked, startled. Not by the words, but the way he said them, soft, without flattery. Like it had cost him something to say aloud. He reached into his coat, pulled out the small pouch she'd made, turned it in his palm, slow. "No one's ever made something for me like this. Not with their hands. Not with meaning." She looked at him then, fully, saw not just the man with kind eyes and calloused hands, but someone who had known his own kind of exile, his own quiet grief. "I made it because I see you," she said. "Not for what people think you are, but who you are when no one's looking." Silence fell again, thicker this time, breathless. The fire hissed. A night bird called from the trees. Then he leaned forward, slow, giving her time. His forehead touched hers, nothing more. Not a kiss. Not yet. Just 2 souls, meeting where wounds no longer needed hiding. And in that soft, wordless moment, she felt chosen. Not claimed, not owed, simply seen. And wanted to say. Now generates section 9 of the story. Next, their emotional bond becomes a life built together. Small plans, shared work, perhaps a proposal not of possession, but of deep-rooted belonging. "You said Colin next," ChatGPT said. "Of course. Here is." He pulled the dying Lakota girl from a river. Her people now call him husband by ancient law. Section 9. A new future. Together they began with the fence. It was Elias's backfield, the one that sloped toward the cottonwoods and hadn't been tended in years. The rails were rotted through, the posts leaning like old soldiers. She brought her own hatchet. Each morning they worked in rhythm, he hammering, she tying wire with gloved hands. She braided her hair tighter now, not to hide, but to stay out of the way of wind and work. Her skirts were patched with pride in the pauses between tasks. They planned chickens, she said, not too many, enough to trade eggs, and a root cellar, he offered. "You'll want herbs kept cool come July. We'll need extra jars. I'll build the shelves." They spoke of the land like it already belonged to both of them. Not out loud, but in the way they used we. Not I, in how he waited for her nod before moving the next beam. In how she smoothed his collar without thinking. She'd moved into the cabin a week after the firelit night, her things folded in a bundle no bigger than a pillow. He gave her the room with the morning sun. She gave him silence that soothed, not strained. One evening, she found a ring in the flower tin, simple brass, hand-shaped, no ceremony, no kneeling, just him leaning on the table, eyes steady. "I'd like to call this place ours, not just mine." She didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached into her pouch, pulled out a single braid thread crimson and tied it around his wrist. A Lakota bond, a vow in gesture. Then she whispered, "Yes, but only if we call it home." Outside, the first crocus had bloomed, small, stubborn, beautiful in its refusal to be late. They married in the back field under the cottonwoods, where the fence now stood straight and strong. No church bells, no preacher in black robes. Just Elias, we are a, and the wind moving through the trees like a song only the land remembered. Mrs. Hodges did not attend, but old Mr. Farrell, who once refused her stitching, came in his best vest and brought a jug of cider. The dressmaker sent a shawl stitched with prairie flowers. The baker's daughter laid a bundle of sweet rolls on the stump beside them. We wore no veil. Her dress was pale blue, hand-sewn, the seams firm and honest. Her braids were tied with red thread. Elias wore his cleanest shirt, the collar pressed sharp. Around his wrist, the crimson string she'd once tied remained faded, now, but unbroken. They spoke no vows. None were needed. Their promise had already been spoken in shared work, in wordless evenings, in the brush of fingers over splinters and seed packets. When the sun began to dip, he reached for her hand and led her in a slow circle, 1 to 1, 2 bare feet in the grass, moving in time with the breath of the earth. Neither smiled broadly, neither cried, but there was peace in their faces, a quietness that came not from stillness but from the end of running. At dusk, she stood beneath the cottonwood, looking over their land, her shawl catching the last of the light. He stepped beside her, their shoulders touching. "You reminded me who I already was," she said. He answered, voice low, "and you reminded me I was never meant to build alone." The prairie held them like a hush. The sky stretched wide. No crowds, no thunder, just two souls steady in their becoming. Behind them, the crocus field bloomed quietly, full of color, and no need for witness.